The bottom line is that the combination of firing those workers and the tariff uncertainty means that we are very close now to a serious economic recession. I think here in the United States, it is widely understood that the level of debt is too high and is not sustainable. So it is definitely part of the calculus about what is to be done at this point. Now, it is not at all clear, not to me and not to many others, that Mr. Trump's tariff program is any way of dealing with this. The real issue here is lowering the rate of debt growth. In other words, reducing the deficits, which many conservative business groups and so on want. And they will now use what happened last Monday, the Japanese selling treasuries and so on, as a sign. Look what is happening. There are more and more holders of debt that are getting worried that the United States may approach a point where it is torn internally between the population that wants the government to use taxes to serve the people versus the government which needs to use taxes to service the debt. That kind of crisis can be very dangerous for creditors, which include the People's Republic of China as the second largest after Japan. And so there's a whole anxiety, and there the argument is that what is most important is the efforts of Elon Musk to fire large numbers of public employees, close down large programs of government spending in the hopes thereby of lowering the need for government borrowing. But even after you look at all of that, the bottom line is that the combination of firing those workers and the tariff uncertainty means that we are very close now to a serious economic recession. They may still avoid it, but at this point, Mark Zandi of Moody's publicly said, in his view, we are weeks away from an economic recession, which at this point in American history would be very, very dangerous. Let me give you an example. A few years ago, a British prime minister, a woman named Liz Truss, tried to advance Conservative Party program. She was part of the Conservative Party that would have sharply increased Britain's national debt. And the London bond market collapsed on her, and she was thrown out of office in a matter of days. She had to leave. The whole thing was a warning to the British that they had to find other, and they have been finding other ways. It is very bad news for the British working class because they have put into power the Labour Party to do the austerity to save the government's indebted problem. And that is why I'm wondering whether the whole firing of public employees here is an attempt to reduce the deficit. At the beginning of this year, in January, the projections of the deficit for the U.S. was almost $2 trillion. That would be dangerous. So they are now on a crash program to do that. But here's the last thing. It's important to understand that one of the reasons for the very large deficits and the rapidly growing debt now is because of what President Trump did in his first term as president. The tax cut of December 2017 expires this year. He must prevent that, he must extend that law, because if he does not, then at the end of this year, corporations and rich Americans will face a big tax cut as the levels of tax go back to pre-2017. That's his political base. That's his support. He would lose that support if he doesn't do that. But by continuing that tax cut, he creates the need for the deficit, which is too dangerous now. So he is caught in that dilemma. And that's what the tariffs and the attack on public employees, that's what that's designed to somehow fix. It's not at all clear yet whether it will be enough to do that. Well, here's the irony that people here in the United States just do not want to face, even though I suspect they understand somewhere. If the United States attacks virtually every other country, which is what these tariffs do, they make it hard, more difficult for every country, China, Vietnam, all of them, to export to the United States. Since the United States is one of the bigger, richer countries in the world, that damages the export industry right away. Okay. The United States is teaching every exporting business in Vietnam, in China, in Cambodia, in, Brazil, it doesn't matter, that the United States is not the secure export market you thought it was. You've expanded your business, you've hired more workers, you're taking chances as a investor, but now you realize that you took chances based on assuming you could sell into the American market. And Mr. Trump is teaching you maybe you can, maybe you can't. If I were a business person, and I have advised them all my life, I would be the first one to say you need to look elsewhere for secure export markets to compensate for what the United States is becoming, a less secure export market. And then the United States has to face the fact that anybody looking to export somewhere else who can't get to the United States, sure, they will look at Europe for sure, but they will also look at China, because China is now rich enough of the Chinese people have some money to spend, that they become the beneficiary of those people alienated by the Trump tariff policy. So that in this way, the Trump tariff policy backfires. And I think you're going to see in the weeks ahead a slow recognition here in the United States that that's happening, and that's part of the larger. That's why I think the denial of a declining empire is fading slowly, but it is fading here.